Hello everyone, Zach Wilson, Hood County Chess Club here, continuing the series on chess tactics. We began the series with the fork in video 1 and the pin in video 2. We're now on our third video with the skewer. Let's get started. The skewer is a simple tactic that attacks a piece, and it's a high value target with a lower valued piece on the other side. So the idea here is that we're attacking the king, and the king is going to have to move, and once the king moves, then we get to get the piece that's on the other side. Now, it doesn't have to be a king and a queen. It could be maybe a rook in the middle and a bishop at the far end, and we end up making the rook move to get the bishop. The idea is that we're making the piece that's in between move out of the way. So here we have the king that's in the middle, and we're forcing it to move out of the way so we can actually get what's on the other side. That's the idea of a skewer. Now, typically skewers happen in endgames because the files are completely open, the ranks are completely open, the diagonals are more open, because most of the pieces have been traded off of the board in an endgame. So let's take a look at what might happen here. Right now, we have white's turn to move, and what we're going to see is that both sides get the opportunity to promote to a queen. And most of the time, in a queen versus queen endgame, it's a draw. However, using the skewer, white can force a win here. Checks the king, king has to move, captures the queen. So let's back that up just a brief moment. What we want to notice is the opportunity for a skewer is when two pieces are on the same straight line, be that a file, a rank, or a diagonal. And this gives us the opportunity then to effectively attack both in the same move. All right, let's look at another famous endgame skewer. This is a famous race and was actually used in the movie Searching for Bobby Fischer. And it's a very fun movie if you want to watch that. And what we see here is the pawns are racing to queen. And each side is going to get their queen. However, when white gets the queen, it comes with check. And so we can see that the king is going to have to move, and then white is going to get the other queen on the other side, and that is how a skewer wins a piece. Now, another famous endgame is whenever we have a rook that's in front of a pawn that's about to promote, and we're trying to get the rook out of the way. The problem is, if the rook simply moved, then black's rook is going to capture this pawn and it's not going to get a chance to promote. Now, a trick is if we were to move with check and then black was to respond, well, then we could possibly promote to a queen. The problem here is that black's king is too close to the back rank. So if we did that, if we just simply checked, well, then he could just take our rook, and then if we tried to promote, well, that's not going to last very long. We're going to lose our queen as well, and we just lose everything. So obviously that's not a good idea. So the endgame study here is what would happen here if the pawn checked the king? What would you do as black? Well, we already know that if black were to take this pawn, then the opportunity white was searching for happens. We can check, avoids the check, but doesn't capture the rook, which means the rook is still protecting this key square. So once the promotion happens, now if black tries to take the queen, white's rook takes over, and now white has a winning game. So this is an endgame that we study so that if this check ever happens, we know to bring our king here. The idea being that, again, with the previous example, if we tried this check maneuver, that we would just lose everything, and it doesn't work. So how can we use a skewer to help us out? Well, in comes the check. He tries to avoid, still guarding this square, and now we move the rook all the way down. And the reason for that is the rook is covering this square, the pawn is covering this square, the king cannot get back this direction. And that means that this pawn is about to promote with protection from the rook. The end result being that black's going to have to give up his rook for this newly promoted pawn, and that leaves white a winning endgame. So black has to take the pregnant pawn. And now do you see the skewer? Check, moves out of the way, captures what's on the other side. Okay, so let's look at a combination here. And this right now, I think if you watch the video on pinning, you can see that this knight is pinned to the king. It cannot move because he cannot put his own king in check. We are concerned as black that white is simply going to promote his pawn, and the pawn has protection from this rook. So it automatically fails if we simply take that pawn. We're giving up a rook for the pawn, and now white has the advantage. So what can we do here? Pause the video if you'd like to, and think about what you would do in a game. The idea is simple. We notice that white's king is on the same rank as all of his pieces. In other words, if this knight wasn't here, we would have a skewer on this rook. So let's get rid of the knight. Captures, captures, and now we see the skewer. King has to move out of the way. We get the rook, and the pawn is too late. We're going to get that too, and we win the game. So you can see how the skewer works. Let's look at one final example in a famous game between Bobby Fischer and his opponent, last name of Stephens, in 1957. This game only lasted 25 moves, but the critical position is at move number 12. So let's just go through the opening. It's a standard Sicilian opening. All of these moves are traditional opening theory for the Sicilian defense, going into the Sicilian dragon. And what we see here is that Bobby Fischer is getting ready to castle on the queen side and go for opposite side castling. And in opposite side castling games, it's a race to see who can checkmate who first. And if you look at these pieces, just for the fun of it, we'll look at it. We see that this pawn has been pinned. We see that this battery has been developed so that the bishop can come in, hoping to trade off the dark squared bishops. If this bishop is gone, then we would have a weakness of dark squares that we could exploit. We've castled on the queen side so that these pawns can march up against the fianchettoed position supported by this pawn. This pawn also protects this square and stops black's knight from entering or his bishop from entering. And we also see that this queen and rook have already developed against or with one another. They've coordinated for a battery here. And so this is very common play for white against the Sicilian dragon. Simple developing moves. Black's trying to get a pawn storm against the king. And here's the critical maneuver. Bobby makes a trade. He says, I'm going to take your knight and lure your queen into a skewer. I want you to notice that the queen and the rook are on the same diagonal. We have a more valuable piece with a lesser valuable piece behind it. So the queen is going to have to move out of the way if she's ever attacked. So where's the threat? The threat is that this bishop is going to come in and skewer the queen and the rook. Now this square is defended by black's knight, so we need to get rid of that knight. So Bobby makes this move here, and this is a brilliant move because he's not only threatening to get rid of this knight so that the skewer can come in, but he's also threatening immediately a royal fork, attacking both the king and the queen at the same time. So black has to deal with this fork immediately. He gets rid of the fork, so then Bobby gets rid of the knight, looking at this square for the skewer. And so that was the defining moment of the game. We can say that black is lost here, but the game did continue on. Instead of taking this knight and allowing the skewer to happen, they let the knight stand and defended the skewer. You'll see that white's knight can't move anywhere really safely except for this square here. We can also see that because we have this battery here, white is threatening to take this hanging pawn because it only has the queen defending it. There's a queen and rook attacking it. There's a lot of things going on here, but mostly we wanted to look at how the threat of this skewer allowed Bobby to make other maneuvers that then eventually wins the game. So he brings in this typical maneuver of the battery of the queen and the bishop defending themselves, attacking to try and trade off the bishops. And what we see here is now we see a pin. We see that he can't capture this knight because then the rook is going to fall. And also, he cannot, absolutely cannot capture this bishop, because hopefully you see that there's nothing that black can do against the checkmate here on h7. So black is truly stuck and truly lost, simply develops a piece. Bobby trades off the bishop in true fashion, creating a weak color complex around the king in the fianchettoed position. Develops the knight away to safety. We see some maneuvering here, and look at this. Takes the pawn, and instead of taking back with the queen, what you need to notice here is that if the queen takes, rook takes, okay, so he tries to get rid of this knight. And I love this move. Threatening, and here we go, another wonderful tactic. Sacrifices the queen temporarily for another royal fork. Bobby Fischer was a tactical genius. He could just see everything, move after move, bringing in all his pieces, and now we see the end result. 3 pieces versus 2. Black is completely lost. I hope you enjoyed looking at that game. I hope you understood the concept of the skewer, that we're looking at attacking one piece that's really valuable to make it move so that we can capture what's on the other side. Please visit us on Facebook at Hood County Chess Club and click the like button to follow us for local events. And remember, you are what you repeat. I encourage you to watch this video again to practice these positions over the board with a friend until they make their way into your next game.